Photoshop to get this big panorama. You're going to be able to just shoot it in one shot. So these are some examples of wide angle lens shots that I've used. This was shot with a Sigma 14 mil. So I was literally right up against this tree with a friend skiing past me. But because the lens is so wide, it gets this big, almost bulbous speed perspective with it. And this was ice fishing, bright and early in the morning. And again, this lens is so wide that I'm right up to the subject here, Mario, but I still get this huge, big, powerful view. And then, of course, with this year that we've been having, the aurora has just been blowing up almost nightly. And so with these lenses having such a low f-stop, you're able to pull in so much light that you can really get that beautiful dance that's going all up in the sky. Zoom lenses or super zoom lenses, depending, these are those huge lenses that are on the sidelines, or the super zooms. And then a normal, just standard zoom lenses where you're going to have a range throughout your focal length, but you're not necessarily getting into these like I am staring at someone's eyeball from across a soccer field. These lenses are super, super popular with taking photos of animals, because you can just be so far away, and animals out in the wild are gonna smell you, and they're gonna hear you. So if you're able to kind of hide out and zoom super far away to a lynx walking around in northern Manitoba, these lenses give you that subtle feeling of stealth and the ability to get closer to these animals or your subjects without actually having to physically get closer to them. I love zoom lenses for taking photos of paddlers so that I can get, right up on them while they're on the river, and I'm not, having to stand in the riverbank or anything like that. I can stay back safely on shore and not have to worry about my camera gear getting splashed or anything like that. But still getting these, really tight, detailed shots of a paddler. The two zoom lenses that I commonly bring, the 24-105 from Canon is my go-to workhorse lens. It's what I use at pretty much every shoot I've had since I first got a 24-105 like 8 years ago. It's the most used focal length amongst videographers. It kind of covers your whole range. And then I have a super mega 120-300, which is like the size of my arm and 11 pounds. And it's my bicep workout for the day, taking that lens out, but super, super sharp, super fast. But an absolute hog, but I love it. So these are some shots that I took with my super zoom. Just I'm standing way back in the forest, shooting out onto these paddlers on the river. And like you can get really, really tight up on them. It's fantastic. With zoom, you also get this crazy, it's called zoom compression. So with a wide angle lens, it takes the distance of subjects and makes them all appear farther apart. Whereas with zoom, you get this opposite effect where it pulls everything together into almost a more flat pane. So like the snowboarders that are filming there and riding, they are actually quite far apart, and they're actually at a feature that's behind this jump that's in the lens here. But because of how this photo's taken, it looks like he's jumping off this jump that is much closer to me, but it's just zoom compression. It's kind of camera tricks. And you also will get a really nice blur to the background. Now the portrait lens. It's called the portrait lens because it's like, you look at most headshots, it was probably taken with the lens at around this focal length, the 35 to 50 millimeter lens. And the reason that this is kind of the go-to portrait shot is because it's natural. It's what our eyes see at. So what someone looks like in a portrait lens, it's going to look normal, or well, normal, if you will, but natural, because that's how we would see the person if we were looking at them face to face. So the portrait lenses are super common for that. They also are usually a fixed lens, so there's no zoom on it. So there's less glass, which will then, if you're shooting through less glass, it'll be a higher quality shot. But it'll also cut down on the weight of that lens in itself, just because there's less moving parts and less stuff in it. The lenses that are portraits, also every company makes what photographers like to call a nifty 50, which would be a 50 millimeter lens, which you can usually get for under $100. They're often made of plastic, which nothing wrong with that. It's a great way to pick a good lens up that you're going to get some really nice portraits with, without having to break the bank, because photography is wickedly expensive. If as you're getting into it, or you're getting more into it, you're going to realize it's quite a lot of money. I used to shoot with a 50-1.4. I have since switched and now shoot a lot more often with a 35-1.4. I just liked having a little bit of a wider view, but that's a huge personal preference thing. They're both fantastic focal lengths that are super, super common. Like I said, it looks quite natural. So if you were, say, sitting right where I was in this canoe, the paddler in front of me, it really does look like you were sitting there. That's how your eyes would probably perceive it. Portrait lenses also will have a really, really low f-stop, which is going to also bring out this really nice blurry background, which is just great for highlighting your subjects. This is, again, my adorable dog, Tego. I tried to work him into the slideshow as much as possible because, well, I love to look at him. Who doesn't like to look at a little puppy, especially when a puppy is sleeping? Yeah, that's my dog. And it also can just make for some nice photos as well, and also some kind of fun, crammed boat shuttle photos. Now the cameras, the bodies themselves. This is actually a Bill Mason, one of the founders of Paddle Canada and one of the fathers of modern canoeing. Did a bunch of really, really cool videography of his paddling. Obviously, he did not have access to the GoPros, but that's what he used for the time, using a film camera on the right side of his head and a lead counterweight on the right side of his head. Because what says safety like strapping a piece of lead to your head and going paddling. So DSLR cameras. These are the cameras that have been around for a long, long time. They started out as film and then moved into digital. But digital single lens reflex is the type of camera. It's where you're going to look through your viewfinder. It's going to hit a mirror, go downwards to another mirror, and out your lens to give you that view. The industry is right now very focused on mirrorless cameras, so not having those lenses or mirrors there. So a lot of DSLRs are becoming a lot more economic and approachable in pricing. You can get a DSLR for like $500. So pricing has really become a lot more approachable on these types of cameras, which is becoming a big draw to help get more people into photography. One other huge pro of these cameras is that your sensor is often going to be clean. What your sensor is it's a digital version of a film negative. So with a film camera, whenever you would click your shutter, the mirror would pop up, the shutter would open, and it would burn that image onto that piece of film. What the sensor is essentially just a digital piece of that covered in pixels. And so whenever your shutter would open, it would flip the mirror up, open the shutter, and those pixels would record the light of whatever you're shooting. And that's it. Now the mirror sits over top of your sensor, which is perfect because every time you change your lens, you expose your sensor to the elements. Now, if you're in a studio, that's fine. There's not a whole lot going on. However, I work in the backcountry, And if you're listening to this, you probably have a lot of interest, or you're already doing a lot of stuff in the backcountry and you're wanting to take photos in the backcountry. The elements out there, there's a lot of stuff. There's blowing sand, there's pine needles, there's dirt, there's wind always, especially when you're paddling upriver. Why is the wind always a headwind when you're paddling upriver? Um, the mirror is going to protect your sensor, which is a huge, huge, huge bonus. And I never personally really appreciated that until I got a mirrorless camera, because I'm constantly cleaning my sensor. The next huge pro of a DSLR is battery life. A mirrorless camera, whenever the sensor is on, it's constantly trying to record that data, and that pulls a ton of battery. So with the DSLR, you're looking at a mirror, which is looking at another mirror, which is looking out your lens. Doing that, you're not using any battery. It's incredible on a trip how often I will have to charge batteries for my mirrorless camera, whereas my DSLR, I can just bring one battery and have it last the same amount of time. Lastly, I love just the click of a shutter. Mirrorless cameras have a little speaker on them with a recorded sound of a shutter, so that every time it takes a photo, it plays that sound just to appease the photographer and keep the habit and that formed response of hearing a shutter going. But you just can't beat the analog sound of a shutter clicking. It's it's just a really subtle love that I have for the DSLR camera. Now, the mirrorless camera is has so many pros on its side of things. It's hard to pick one over the other in my mind. As far as the mirrorless cameras go, they're a lot smaller. You don't have to have all these mirrors and moving pieces inside of your camera. Those are taken out. You now just have shutter and sensor. So the size is brought down and the weight is brought down, which if you're doing a hiking trip, if you're going to say hike the Ontario or you're hiking the West Coast Trail or wherever you're going, weight matters. Like you don't want to be carrying a ton of heavy stuff. So mirrorless cameras have really, really helped to reduce the weight of the camera itself. Mirrorless cameras also offer USB charging. So on a trip, I bring a battery pack and I can charge my camera out in the field. And I have solar panels so I can charge the battery pack so I can keep charging it in the field. So I can just kind of shoot a lot more however I want without that, kind of nagging fear of, is my battery going to die before the end of this trip? When I worked at a summer camp years ago, I took out trips that would range up to 6 weeks. And you pack 4 batteries for this trip. And at the start, you're taking a lot of photos, but in the back of my head, I'm always thinking, am I going to have enough battery for the last week? Should I stop taking photos now to save battery for then? And you got to almost kind of triage what you think might be moments on your trip. Mirrorless cameras are also fantastic hybrid cameras. You have these really small, compact bodies that take fantastic photos, but you're also starting to shoot 4K video or really high quality video with these bodies. So having the ability to, instead of bringing a DSLR and a cinema camera, I can just bring one mirrorless camera and do both. It's going to save a ton of weight and also save a lot of money, because instead of buying a DSLR and a big cinema camera that can shoot these beautiful videos, I can get it both in one compact product. The speed of these cameras is also just exploding. With a DSLR, you have to have the mirror flip up and come back down every time for a photo, which they can shoot fast, don't get me wrong. But with a mirrorless camera, you don't have that mirror flipping up and down, so you can shoot even faster. You can shoot still photos at the same speed that a movie camera is shooting. A movie camera will usually shoot at 30 frames per second. But now with these cameras, I can take 30 photos per second. It's crazy. And mirrorless cameras are also just where the industry is going. Kind of like with iPods and iPhones taking out CDs, it's just where the industry is going, is towards mirrorless cameras. So that's where all the tech is going these days. Drones are also something that I use to shoot quite often, and something that is becoming a lot more affordable and open to consumer level people. But something that does come with a big warning, and something that I do highly recommend, that if you are interested in a drone, do your research and do so with caution. Um, there's a lot of, like, I have a drone license. Um, and I do recommend, if you get a drone, get your drone license. There are certain weights of drones that different laws come into place with, but the laws are hard set, and they'll, even if you post a photo on Instagram, you can still get fined off of just that, because they can do location tagging, and fines start at around $10,000. So if you are going to be doing drone photography and videography, you should really, really look into where you're going to be using it, what you're going to want to do with it, um, and the laws that you need to follow, just because Transport Canada is very, very serious with drone users because of things that drone users have done. Cleaning supplies is something that I also bring as well, because if I can keep my camera clean, it keeps my camera working well, and it keeps dust out of my photos and saves me time in Photoshop afterwards, taking out all these little dust specks. So that little odd looking thing there that you see on the screen, that's called a rocket air. So I use that to blow onto the sensor of my camera in very targeted, specific ways, to blow little specks of dust off of it if I need to. I also bring a cloth just to, wipe my lens off, because I'm taking a lot of photos of paddling. My camera's gonna get wet. I want to be able to clean my lens with a nice tight knit, kind of like a glasses cleaning cloth, to keep all of the little debris off of the lens itself. And then a sensor brush. If I were to get something big on the sensor of my camera, I have a special little cleaner that I can wipe along it, just to make sure that I'm keeping it as clean as possible. Batteries. I'd like to bring battery packs so that I can charge as much stuff as I can, like I said, to make sure that I can keep taking as many photos as possible without having to worry about burning my batteries. Pelican cases, really any waterproof case or bag that you can have your stuff in, is huge, because you don't want to get your gear wet. So whatever you have it in, whether it be a Pelican case or in a nut case, some kind of hard case, a dry bag, I try to always have my stuff in waterproof cases. If it's not in that, if I'm going hiking, just a good camera bag, something that's comfortable, something that you can wear for a while. There are some really nice shoulder sling bags, but personally, I find them to be quite uncomfortable after like even just a kilometer of walking. So having some good kind of camera bag, the one in that photo, the blue bag there, has a hiking hip belt. So it really is the strongest, best possible belt that I could have, which is going to keep the bag comfortable while I'm walking around, because that bag, I usually have up to 50 pounds of camera gear inside of it. Hot tips. This slide is funny because that's fire. Scout the area if possible. Before I take photos, I like to walk around, so I know where I'm shooting, and also so I can get a few different perspectives before I start shooting, to try and figure out what might be the best angles. Google Maps has their street view, which is a great way if you're shooting in a city, just to kind of look around the area before you go there. And then I also use Google Maps to satellite view rivers and cliffs where I might be climbing or paddling, just to get an idea of, like, how big is this rapid? Is there a side that I might probably want to be on? I mean, I'll make the decision when I get there, but with satellite imagery of the globe, it allows me to get at least an initial scout before I get to wherever it is. Shoot to freeze the water. And what I mean by this is, if you are taking photos of paddling, you want the shutter to move fast enough that the water is going to be still. Because when people are paddling in rapids, if you're taking photos of rapids, you need to be moving either slower or faster than the water itself. So if you're taking a photo that's quick enough to keep water droplet still, you're definitely going to have a sharp subject, you know, on the river. And there's obviously an exception if you're doing some really slow, long exposures of a rapid or waterfall. This is what I mean by freeze the water. So when Tyler hits a big wave here, everything is frozen in time and really, really sharp. Silica packs in your bags. Every time I get a shipment or order something online or working at the shop, we get a shipment of clothing in. I like to take all those little silica packs and I put them in all of my camera bags. Anywhere that I'm going to keep a camera so that if something does get wet and I leave it in there, it's going to absorb that humidity or absorb the little bit of moisture that is on my equipment. Shoot for the highlights. A lot of the stuff in the backcountry is super, super reflective. And if it's a really bright photo and you're shooting for the shadows, all of your highlights are going to be super blown out and it's going to be really, really hard to see that and save it in Photoshop. So make your meter happy. What I say by that is if you look through your viewfinder, you'll see usually there'll be your camera meter of if it's, you know, 1, 2, 3 steps overexposed or 1, 2, 3 steps underexposed. So when I say make my meter happy, you want to adjust your settings until it is sitting right in the middle because you can always fix it in post. This photo here is exactly what I mean by that. I'm shooting into the sun of my friend Ben. So I shot this photo so that the sky, I could still get some cloudy details because when I brought it into Lightroom to edit it, I was able to pull a bunch of light back into the shadows and bring a lot more detail into the photo and just add a lot more character to it. There's a term called chimping, and what chimping is when you take a photo, you look at it so you can actually see your photo on the screen. Some photographers say, you shouldn't chimp, you should just know that you nailed your shot without looking at it. Well, when you're in the backcountry, you don't know when you're going to be in this place again, or you want to make sure you're nailing this shot because you only get so many tries at it. So if you take a photo, quickly go look at your playback. See, did you get the photo right, or do you need to change your settings? And continuous autofocus is a huge, huge piece of technology in these cameras nowadays that is just so advanced that it will track your subject. So like with this snowboarder here, through his whole jump, my camera was keeping focused on just him. So use that continuous autofocus to keep your subject sharp throughout that whole shot, no matter where they're moving. Lastly, we touched on this at the start with that risk versus reward. Just be ready for the worst because sometimes bad things are going to happen. So just make sure you are mentally prepared for that kind of thing and know where your repair shops are in the event that something happens. If you live in Winnipeg, Computech on Sherbrooke, the guy who works there is an absolute wizard. So utilize him if something is to happen to your camera stuff. Just go out and shoot, honestly, is the biggest piece of advice that I have. If you have a camera, use it. If you have just a cell phone, use it. If your friend will lend you a camera or you're going to rent one, use it. Every photo you take is one step closer to those 10,000 hours. So shoot as much as possible. The beauty of digital is you can delete it. It doesn't matter. You can just sit there on burst mode and take 100 photos, pick the one good one that you took and delete the rest. It's no longer, I love to shoot film, but the stress of film is I have to make sure I nail every shot. So the beauty of digital is just go shoot, just take photos. The worst case scenario, you still have a memory that you can look back on. That about does it for my presentation. One of my favorite things about talking is going over and answering questions. So by all means, type them away. And yeah, Connor will start asking them.
Oh, I'm on mute. Sorry about that. Yeah, so put them in the chat, everyone. And while we're waiting for you to type, a big thank you to Garrett for joining us tonight. One tip I can give you guys, if you have a little slow in getting the motivation going for the season of whether it's skiing, paddling, whatever it is that you love to do, check out his Instagram. It's what I do before trips to get excited. If I'm lacking motivation, I go straight to his photos to get a bit more motivation to get out there. So be sure to check out a lot of his work. So We'll open up to questions,
Thank
and
you.
we'll give you some time to type.
You can find my Instagram as my name at Garrett Fache. I also have my business account, which is at Wildhouse Media. My website is wildhousemedia.ca if you want to see my portfolio and my videos. And my dog's Instagram is Tego My Ego, which you can find on my website as well.
I'll post the website link in the chat as well, so you guys can find it. So our first question is, what editing software do you suggest?
So I personally use Adobe Lightroom predominantly. I also use Photoshop periodically, but for the most part, I just use Lightroom. Lightroom is expensive. I mean, I do photography for a job, so I can justify these expenses. But it does cost money. So using, if you Google GIMP, GIMP, photo editor, that's a free one that you can use. Also, on just your phone, there's a free app called Snapseed, which is also a great one to use. You can, if you take a photo on your camera, put it onto your computer and send it to your phone, and you can edit it on there with Snapseed. That's another great free mobile editor. So yeah, I use Lightroom, but GIMP and Snapseed are great free options as well.
Awesome. We have here, any recommendations for solar battery chargers?
For the most part, I use Goal Zero. I find them to be one of the best in the industry, at least at kind of the consumer slash prosumer level. They also have a really, really good warranty program, which for me is a huge part as to what companies I purchase my gear from is, what's their warranty. Also really good customer service. But Goal Zero is usually my go-to for solar.
Here's an Earth Day one. What kind of role, if any, do you think adventure photography can play in conservation and eco-activism? That's a
Um, well, I think that, I mean, for myself, I live in the city, so all I see for the most part is concrete. And so even as simple as using outdoor photography to show people how beautiful some of these places are that we have so close, will one hopefully get people to check them out, go there themselves, and appreciate them, but also just kind of give that constant reminder of there is a lot more world out there, than just the city that I live in. I need to make sure that I'm doing my part to help protect it. And I look at it, I think it's beautiful. I want my kids, my grandkids, to be able to see these places as well. I mean, for the most part, we're not just protecting it for ourselves and trying to keep it alive. It's for people down the road as well.
This is an interesting one. Do you find it tough to stay in the moment while you're filming the moment?
Oh my goodness. Yes. The last one of the last slides that I had that I said just go out and shoot, I would give that an asterisk because some of my favorite moments I have to put the camera away for, because it's hard to decide, like, oh, I want to capture this moment, but I also want to experience it. I want to have this campfire talk with my friends, because being a subject in a photo, it's intimidating. My friends are pretty used to me having a camera out all the time, but having a camera out can kind of change how people are going to talk and just kind of interact. So I will, for those moments that I think this is going to be something that I want to experience and I want to have a nice organic flow to, like the conversations around the campfire, or safety talks, or just something that I think is going to be really special on a trip. I'll I'll put my camera down because I want everyone to feel, one, at ease if they're uncomfortable in front of a camera, and two, I just want to make sure that I'm living it as well.
Here's kind of a part B. Is there any tips for balancing that, living the experience and shooting it?
For
That's what
living
you do.
living the experience, I like to, one, not, walk away to take out my camera and walk back in. I like to try and at least have it on a camera strap hanging so that, one, people know right away, hey, there's a camera out, Garrett might be taking photos, so that it's not just a surprise. But B, it allows me to, quickly shoot something and step back. Also with the zoom lenses, I can stand farther back and take a group shot without having to, organically be in there, just taking that photo. They can kind of have their own little moment as is. But it is very hard to balance those kinds of things. It's something that I'm still working on learning as well, to balance, how much of this trip do I want to be a participant versus how much of this trip do I want to be the hired photographer for. And it's tough, but I want to at least try and have, at a minimum, a conversation with each person that's there. I should be able to have enough time that I can talk with everyone there and still have my media quota, if you will.
Tips for shooting around a fire or campfire shots with people around it.
Those can be really tough just because, like, you have this super, super bright subject, the fire, and then everything else is really, really dark. So that'll be some instances where I will try and the fire might just have to be a little bit blown out in terms of its highlights. So you might lose a little bit of color in there, but I'm going to get a little bit more in the shadows to kind of pull the people in. Yeah, it's a tough one. If I have something reflective, like a piece of tinfoil on a trip, sometimes I'll have like something just to kind of fold out, like a little that I can put beside me to reflect a lot of the light from the fire onto the subject. It's going to keep all the lights and colors the same. I'm not having to use a flash, and it's going to over amplify the brightness of the fire to fill in the background as well. But campfire shots are quite tough. I find that I'll go into Lightroom and end up pulling that shadows and the dark tones up just to try and pull as much detail as I can out of those areas.
This could possibly be the best one to finish on. So I'll say this will be our last question, especially for Earth Day at home. Since interprovincial travel has been minimized, what has been your favorite part of Manitoba to explore during COVID?
Wow. Favorite part of Manitoba to explore. I mean, I did I did the blood vein last year, which was awesome. And like I love these really remote trips. But I think the area that I spent the most time in and that I tried to explore a bunch of different parts of was the White Shell. Um, it's so close, like an hour and a half ish out of the city. And Whiteshell Provincial Park is huge, and there's so much to it. Like I camped in it in all 4 seasons last year and this year. The Whiteshell is a super, super underutilized area in Manitoba. Like it has waterfalls that we were canoeing and kayaking on. It has rock climbing and bouldering. It has hiking. It has downhill skiing. Like it has everything that I seek out for outdoor adventure sports, and that a lot of people spend a lot of money to go to British Columbia to do. I love British Columbia. I'm not knocking it. But it's really cool to see that there's all of this just an hour and a half away from where I live, and that I can go and do. So yeah, if like, Whiteshell Provincial Park, I highly recommend it.
Awesome. Well, again, Garrett, we appreciate you so much hopping on here with us and celebrating Earth Week. For everyone else, we will see you hopefully the rest of the week. We have presentations throughout the week, ending on Sunday evening. And we hope you stick around for some of those. So check out our website for that. And like I said, please go check out Garrett's work. It's incredible to get the motivation going to get into our backcountry and explore more of our beautiful province. And if you can't do that, be sure to explore your neighborhood nature nook and get out there and just try to connect with nature. Because like I said last night, connection equals responsibility. The more we feel responsible for something, the more we want to protect it. So with that, we will sign off, and we will say take care to everyone. So we'll see you hopefully soon.
Thanks for coming, everyone.